We have considered in our last class and lecture about the formation of the books that we have today. And we have begun with the first vision that Sister White received. Somebody remember the subject of the vision and the date of the vision?
I think the subject, I believe she was rising higher and higher, and I think the subject was heaven.
The subject was heaven, yes. The vision was giving about one specific subject.
Just a quick question. This is a continuation from last class, right?
Yes. That was the vision of the way of the Advent people. And she saw how they went higher and higher. Yes, it is correct. But it's about the people of God, and the question is why this was the first vision given to her and when. Which is the relationship between this vision and the historical moment that Sister White and also other believers were in? It's always very important to understand the vision or the prophecy or the revelation that God gives to his people to know the historical moment, to understand why this vision was given in and not another vision. The vision was given in winter 1844, December 1844. And the disappointment was in which month of which year?
October.
October 1844.
Yep.
So the historical setting of this vision was a comfort that the Lord sent to his people. He don't forget them. He is aware of the sufferings that they are going through because they realize that Jesus didn't come, but what he was doing is moving from the holy place to the most holy place. And the vision tried to comfort the faithful ones to be confirmed in the truth and to go on in the way that they have begun. Now, what happened with this first vision and also other visions that she received short after this date and even a couple of years after? We have considered this, so I am not asking something new. I only making the connection between our last class and this one. Yes, brother.
They were written and
Okay.
made articles and later on books.
Okay. First was oral communication, right? So Sister White received it, and then she communicated to people. But this communication that she received from the Lord was distributed in two different forms. The first vision. So one was oral and the other was in the form of letters. Yes, this is correct. Now, what happened with these letters? Who decided to reprint it or to republish and to send also to other people? Who decided about this? The same people that received it. They were so blessed, so encouraged with this vision that the Lord gave to them, that the people himself that received the letters decided to copy it and to send also to other people. And in this way began this redistribution of this first vision. Now, what happened after these letters become well known? Yes, and how they become articles? Why? How you can have articles when you have what? Because you need to publish articles where? Yeah, in a newspaper or in a magazine, right? Because you cannot say, yeah, here is an article, but you need to include it in a magazine or in a newspaper. So what happened with these letters that become articles?
They were published in the present truth.
The Present Truth was the first magazine of the Advent believers. And you need to know this. And when was the first time that the Present Truth appeared? Yes, you have it there. So, this appeared in the Present Truth. And the first one issue was 1849. Now, what happened with this magazine in 1850? You have all the information there.
The name was changed.
Okay. So the magazine changed name. Why? If you memorize information without understand why this is important or why this happened, you will not possess the knowledge. You will only retain empty information. So you need to connect links of knowledge in order to have the completely overview of facts, in order that you retain this information. So what we are trying to do here is to understand generally how the process was. So the first vision was oral communicated, also in letters. The letters become articles. Were published first in the first magazine, The Present Truth. Then The Present Truth was cancelled as a title, but the magazine remained with a new title. And the question is, why they changed the name? Why?
I think because they changed the name because they had received greater light at this point, and now they had some light on the Sabbath and more light on the second advent of Christ.
Yes, and they wanted that the main
Focus.
faith that they believe, or the main focus, will be concentrated also in the title of the magazine, so that everyone that received the magazine knew that the second coming of Christ and the Sabbath are the main purpose and the main thoughts presented in the articles included in this magazine. So a commission of different believers were formed in order to prepare everything. The number of pages also increased. And now, what happened when this magazine was in existence? More articles with more revelations and with more visions were added regularly. So in this way, they decided that all the articles that belong to the same subject and that they are from Sister White, related with visions and with special revelations of the Lord needed to be put together in a pamphlet. So from the magazine system, we came to pamphlet. And this appeared in 1851. And the title was A Sketch of the Christian Experience and Views of Ellen G. White. And this was her first book. That was the first book ever issued. This one. This was the first one of all. So if somebody asks you which was the first book and when this appeared, that was summer 1851, 64 pages, and was entitled A Sketch of the Christian Experience and Views of Ellen G. White. And contained not only the articles that previously appeared in both magazines, but also other chapters were added to it. A supplement was added to this first pamphlet in 1854. That was a second pamphlet that was a supplement. So to the 64 pages, they added 48 pages more. We have explained this, everything, the last time. We are only reviewing. And these two pamphlets become, with the time, in 1882, the two first parts of early writings. So when you have the book Early Writings in your hands, you know that the two first parts were published originally in letters, become articles in both magazines, become pamphlets, and then become early writings. So this is only one example that we realize that when you have a book, in this case early writings, it's not a book that exists from the beginning as such. So become a book. And this is one example of the evolution of the writings until appear published as a book. We have mentioned already how early writings was enlarged with a third section, and that was the first work of spiritual gifts, volume 1, and so further on. And volume 3 and 4, we have mentioned this already. Now, these spiritual gifts we have until now. They are little black books that you can until now see it. And I will recommend it to look at it. We have in the library here, so that you will see how when they compile it, the different articles in the spiritual gifts, they also mention every section separated, because originally were articles that after were put together. Now, we have this in little volumes separated according to subjects. Now, one large section of the visions and the information that was given to Sister White about these panoramical visions was especially related with the controversy between Christ and Satan, and especially focused in the first centuries of the Christianity until the Great Reformation of the 16th century. So they decided to put this all together in a chronological order according to the historical events, and then we find the first time the idea of this, the Great Controversy series. So we see here that the planned to publish was not isolated information or decision, but was connected with the way how the Lord gave the information. So, information was increasing, then more books, more magazines, more pamphlets appeared, more articles. In order to keep the information and to share the information independently of the timetable of a magazine, that one article appeared only one time and you cannot repeat it again in the next magazine. The people are not going to buy the magazine if the content is the same. So they decided that it's needed to read it more than once. And many people that don't receive older issues that have also the information included in all these articles from the past. So they decided that to compilate everything from the past and for the present time, put it in chronological order, and then issue different books. And that was the origin of the book that we know now as the Great Controversy. So then in autumn 1884, the first version of the Great Controversy was ready for distribution. And we see the content that was included was from the first century of Christianity only until the Great Reformation of the 16th century. So it's not the Great Controversy that we have today, because which is the first and which is the last chapter of our contemporaneous Great Controversy? Which is the first chapter and which is the last chapter?
I believe the first chapter is the war in heaven.
Great Controversy,
Oh.
the first chapter.
Destruction of Jerusalem.
Yes,
Mm.
this is the first chapter, the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. Yeah, it's not by the Babylonians, by the Romans. Which year?
AD 70.
70.
Yeah.
Year 70. That was the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. In this way began the Great Controversy, and which is the last chapter, which is the subject, how close the book. The book closed after the millennium, and the new earth and the new heavens. When the earth is purified completely, when the New Jerusalem came down, and when the earth became the middle point of this universe, and the throne of God will be here. So this is the last chapter. So if we consider our the content of our Great Controversy that we have now, and we realize that in 1884, where from the destruction of Jerusalem until the Reformation, from the 16th century, so this first publication was less than the half that we have today. But that was the first time that was published, and were published 50,000 copies. So in the same way that early writings that we have today was not the same as appeared the first time, also the Great Controversy was enlarged with the time, and this is the reason why we have different editions. Now, then we have also not only this short edition on the Great Controversy, but we have two main editions. We have then the North America edition in 1888, but also we have one in Europe. And in United Kingdom was the publishing house also from the church, and also publish a European version. We have the British version and also British English, and we have the American version. And this version from 1888 was addressed to the public in general. And many of the more common subjects for Advent believers were omitted. Was made a selection of the information inside. And everything that couldn't offend people that were not Adventists was omitted. So we have this special version from the Great Controversy from 1888. So in 1911 was needed to redo the Great Controversy, was illustrated again, and was added also historical notes, and some of the historical reference also changed, and a new edition came. So what this mean? This don't mean that the inspiration needed to be corrected, that the visions that she originally received were not accurate enough, and therefore they needed to be corrected, because many of the accusations against the spirit of prophecy is that why a book came and it's only one part of the book, and after they enlarge and again they change and they take things out and they put again things in and they prepare a new version. Why this? So this is one of the accusations that people that don't accept the spirit of prophecy use to say that everything is a manipulation. And they presented, for example, a long list of contradictions about the Great Controversy, because they compared the first edition, the second edition, the American edition, the British edition, the edition for the public, and then the final edition also for Adventists and public. And they see differences, additions and also omissions. And they say, you see how the things are manipulated. This has nothing to do with the revelation of God. But to come to this conclusion show only the ignorance of the process, how things came to be. So we have already considered how the Great Controversy came and become a final book as we have it today. Let us consider now patriarchs and prophets. So when the Great Controversy came to his final version that was able to be used by Adventists and also by non-believers, then Sister White went back to prepare then patriarchs and prophets. Because if you remember, the first part of patriarchs and prophets that after become patriarchs and prophets appear the first time in what kind of book? Or series, because after become like a series with different volumes. Which is the first chapter of patriarchs and prophets? About what?
Satan, well,
Yes?
he follows.
Yeah. And which is the last chapter of patriarchs and prophets? Without looking. The death of David. With the death of David is the last section of patriarchs and prophets. In the same way, what we need to learn in every book of the Bible, how these begin, what is included, and how they close, we need to do it with the main books that we have. So patriarchs and prophets and Great Controversy and the other that we will consider. So in which book appeared first some information related to the content that appeared after in patriarchs and prophets? We have mentioned already. early writings. The third section of early writings. When you please take the book Early Writings and go through, and you will find exactly that the two first sections are the two pamphlets. And that the third section is part of the Spiritual Gifts Volume 1 until 4, some articles, not the completely version. And after these articles of early writings become the gifts of prophecy, was also made a selection of this information that become also patriarchs and prophets. So this is the completely way how patriarchs and prophets came to existence. So Patriarchs and Prophets was also not a book that Sister White write down from the beginning until the end. Was also a compiled information from articles that appear in early writings, in spiritual gifts, in different volumes, distributed, and then gathered together, rewrite, put in the chronological historical order, and become then included in the structure of Patriarchs and Prophets. And in fact, when was published the first time in 1890, appeared as a supplementary book to the Great Controversy. Let us consider the desire of ages. Who explained to me how the desire of ages came to existence also? Because we have mentioned already. Do you remember we have mentioned the dates when the different volumes of spiritual gifts appear and the content in every single volume? We have mentioned this. So the Desire of Ages is not a book originally, written from the beginning until the end. Let us go back and we will see the origin of it. The volumes 2 and 3 of the spiritual gifts that were published in 1877 and 1878 and deal with the life and work of Christ and the apostles. So, the precedents of published work to the Desire of Ages were volume 2nd and 3rd of spiritual gifts, published in 1877 and 1878.
That comprised the whole Book of Desire of Ages, those two?
No, one section only. After, she received more visions.
Oh.
But the original part, how they began with the Desire of Ages, was taken all these articles that were already collected, compiled, that appeared the first time in the Spirit of Prophecy, and then become the Desire of Ages, but not in the final version that we know yet. Because when she went to Australia in autumn 1891, she wanted to finish the Desire of Ages and was needed to refine, rewrite some of the articles and to bring the book to a conclusion, because which is the first chapter of the Desire of Ages? Which is the first chapter? About what?
Love of God.
Yes, this is correct. Love of God. And which is the last chapter? How close the book? with the farewell of Jesus to the disciples, yeah, and with the promise of the Holy Spirit, because this is the way how Acts of the Apostles began, with the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. It's an introduction, an introductory chapter, and then began this section. So, approximately a third part of the book was finished during the years 1892 and 1898 in Australia. Now, the book, The Desire of Ages, took a long period of time because different articles, letters, books, manuscripts were compiled in order to put together all the information receiving published and received by revelation in order to put together the book. But now they have a problem because then was too much. Everything that was written down about Jesus' life, Jesus' ministry, Jesus' preaching, Jesus' healings. So they decided that they needed to select information, otherwise it will be too much. So they decided that the majority of the parables will be out of the Desire of Ages. And they decided that the Desire of Ages will be focused on the biography of Jesus. And most of all, his ministry in general, but in a chronological order. That was the purpose, because if they added to it all the other visions about the explanation of the parables, the explanation of the different sermons, the explanation of all the miracles, of all the special and extraordinary acts of Jesus, will be not enough or will be too much for a book. So they pre-select all the information so that most you find a biographical, chronological presentation of Jesus since he came to this earth until he went out of this earth, went back to heaven. So, when he came to the earth until he went out of the earth was the final structure that the book received. So, from all these compilations about the life, the ministry of Jesus, they divided in 3 main books. These become The Desire of Ages, Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing, Christ Object Lessons, and after, the Ministry of Healing. So, 4 books, but 3 originally. So, The Desire of Ages, general, the lifetime of Jesus on this earth. The Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing, only about every single sentence that Jesus pronounced in the Mount and the respective comment. And then Christ's Object Lessons were selected the main parables with their respective explanation. And now, one part of the healing principles and healing miracles of Jesus are also in the first section of the book, The Ministry of Healing. So again, you see that there is no one book, no one that was written down from the beginning all the way through until the end. Every single book is a compilation. It's compilation. We will come to a step to Christ, yes. And this is very, very important that we understand it. Because otherwise, general, you can see, is the most common idea. The people take a book and say, this book was written by Sister White. And this is not correct. For example, last the events. Sister White don't wrote this book. The content were from articles, manuscripts, and different written information that Sister White received from the Lord. But the book as such was not compiled by herself. Therefore, the books that she don't compile herself, we need to consider according to this principle. Because all the books after 1915 that were compiled was not after the principles that she presented, because we will study the testament of Sister White, which guidelines she gave to compile books after her death. And we see that was not fulfilled. Until now, it's not fulfilled. But these books, for example, The Desire of Ages, that is a compilation, was done during her life. So she was in charge to gather all the articles, to classify them, not alone. She had different secretaries and people that help her. We will speak about this after in another lesson. But she had the last decision about the structure of the book. Which article come first, which article after, where to cut, which part needed to be rewrite in order to have a panoramic perspective of the purpose of the book. Yeah? So this is very important to understand, because books compiled after, we need to consider as such. This don't mean that the content of this book that is from new appearance is not right. But we need to consider in the proper context. I repeated again examples like the Christmas tree, like the article of marriage and remarriage in the Advent home. Okay? We will see this also in details. So all these compiled books we need to consider in the proper context. And we will have a completely different perspective of the situation. So let us see about the Acts of the Apostles. We have considered until now how patriarchs and prophets came to be, Desire of Ages, and the great controversy. But if you consider this, we have, for example, Prophets and Kings, and the Acts of the Apostles added now to this series because they realized that there were big gaps. Yeah? If you began with Patriarchs and Prophets, and the last chapter is about the death of David, and then we began with Jesus, yeah, what is in between? Because the idea is to have a general overview of the plan of salvation, and between the controversy with heaven and with God and Satan. So, Patriarchs and Prophets finished with the death of David, then the Desire of Ages with Jesus coming to earth, and then the great controversy began with the first century of Christianity. So what happened in between? So we have two main gaps that needed to be filled. So we have considered one period went from David's death till Christ's birth, and the other was first century of the Christian church. So was needed to fill these two main gaps. So when was gathered the information for the Desire of Ages, they already classify articles for journals, different manuscripts, and short notices or comments that she had received about other periods of time. So they put this aside, and then when they try to fill the gaps, they look for all the revelations that she had received about these two main sections, and then began this work. And different pages, even completely chapters, needed to be rewrite and supplemented, added to it, because was not enough information. So we have in 1911 this last version from the Acts of the Apostles. Now, the other big gap was Prophets and Kings. And then immediately after the publication of the Act of the Apostles began then the work for this second gap. And the pressure was big. And Sister White was not in the best health condition at this time. And she died in 1915. In February is when she had her accident that she fell. And everything was finished except the last chapters that was only outlined. But was enough information gathered from the manuscripts of the author to include these last chapters. So that was done after her death. So Prophets and Kings is a book that presented the two possibilities. It's the compilation during the life of Sister White. And the final publishing of the book was after her death. And for the last two chapters, they were compiled according to the information that was gathered, but she was no more alive. So for the completely series of the book, the only one that was published after her death was Patriarchs, Prophets and Kings. Now the homework to be done related with this subject that we have considered today about how the series of the Great Controversy came to us as we have it now, you need to make a summary of the content of every single book that are part of the series of the Great Controversy. Second, you need to summarize the content of every one of each. So only it's going from this period of time until this period of time. This is the second element in the homework. And the third element of this homework is how every book appeared, came to existence. So I repeat it. First section of the homework, the list of the completely series of the Great Controversy. Second element, a summary of the content included in every single book of the series of the Great Controversy. Third element of the homework is to present the evolution of every single book, how this book came in the form and in the content that we know today. Questions?
So how each book was compiled?
Correct. This is the last.
So, say the Great Controversy, it has articles from here, from there.
But you need to do it for every single book.
Yeah.
Yes. How? But put it in chronological order. Yeah. For example, the Desire of Ages. The origin of this book began this year. Was published the first time part of the content in form of whatever. After, that was compiled in the volume of this book that became this and this, with this title. After was a supplement written. After so, and then became the book that we know today. And the final and first printing was in year so and so. That, about the evolution of every single book. The reason why we do this is that we understand that this that we have in our hands as the Great Controversy series was not as we have it today. This don't mean that this is not right, that this is not good. This is only one proof more how the spirit of prophecy works. Because the books of the Bible are exactly done according to the same system. It's exactly the same. So we have studied different examples. The 5 books of Moses was exactly the same system. And this don't mean that they are not important, are not inspired, or are not a revelation of God. And according to this, what we have studied in the past, how the spirit of prophecy was functioning in the Bible, we find exactly the same system and method in the present revelation of the spirit of prophecy for our present time. And we will see that for all the other books beside the series of the Great Controversy, the system was the same. And in order to give explanation about the specific subjects, this principle of the gathering or the compilation or from the origin of different sources is extremely important to understand all the content of every single book, and especially doctrinal elements that are included. When you, for example, have counsels on diets and foods, one section of the book, also the book is a compiled book, this we know, was after the death of Sister White. So we know that the compilation was not done by Sister White. This don't mean that it's a book of second category, or you cannot consider so important or so good as the other one because Sister White don't make the compilation. This don't mean this. This means only that when you study the book, you need to consider it. So you will see that the book don't follow a time chronological order. Don't follow. Don't follow. Because the book is divided not according to time, but according to subjects. And this makes a difference to understand things. Because when you find the subject about the use of milk and eggs or cheese, the use of fats, the use of meat, you don't find in the book according to the chronological dates. You find it according to subjects. Now, when you need to give an explanation of the position and the evolution of the health reform through the Advent history, you cannot take the content of this book as it appears in it, because it's not in chronological order according to time. It's in order according to subjects, not according to time. And if the people read it as it is, they came to wrong conclusions. And this is the difference. And in order to clarify the people that the books are not, this book specifically that we mention now, is not compiled according to timetable, but according to subjects, change completely the perspective and disturb the overview how the health reform was presented. If that was done with purpose or without purpose, this is not our point to consider. But we have the information, and when we put the information in the time chronological order, we have a completely different perspective. This is only one example how important it is to know, when you have a book, to know how this book came to existence. The book, The Last Events, is exactly the same. It's not according to the date when the revelation about the subject was given. No. The information is gathered according to subjects, not according to the chronological order how the information was given. And this makes a great and big difference. So may the Lord help us to understand it through this homework that I am sure you will enjoy, because it's extremely important. And you will use this for the rest of your life. So may the Lord help you and bless this word in our hearts. It's my wish and prayer. Amen.
Amen.